welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. This is a pleasure and a great favorite of ours, Raymond Arroyo, the one and only, a great friend for 20 plus years here at EWTN. His new wonderful book, Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, by Random House, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. And this is a great read. It's easy for me to say. I mean, you're my friend. I'd tell you it was good if it wasn't, but it's wonderful. And the reason I can tell you it's so good is because the most honest person I know in my life, Matthew Keck.
Oh, great man.
My autistic son. Loved the book. Can't wait for the new ones to come out.
Oh, I love it.
And was really thrilled about it. And
well, he read it early on. He read it was in its first iteration.
His first iteration, yes. So he was one of the early reviewers of the work, and he loves to read books like this, and he's really looking forward to it coming out.
Adventure.
And he got a lot out of it. I wanted you to know that.
Kids just love adventure. I mean, and when I say kids, I mean all of us. What I've found out as I've been in this area. Half of the audience for these books are 18 and older. And I think the reason adults are drawn to it is they crave an escape, something with a sense of wonder and awe. And there's something special about this book. It's real things you can touch and feel, and it's about our common history.
And without saying anything, it's great storytelling, which you've always been able to do in the wonderful stories on Mother Angelica, Mother Angelica's life. You know, it goes without saying, you're a wonderful storyteller. You've got a great way of phrasing things and putting things, your voice in there, but conveying it in a way that people really get to the heart of the matter. So I think that's clear, and certainly without pushing anything further than it should be. I mean, this is the kind of thing that would make a wonderful movie. Obviously,
well, there's some interest out there.
You know,
we don't want to jinx it.
Right, exactly. But I mean, I think in terms of what people are watching today, you think about Indiana Jones early on and things like that. Now we're kind of into the Marvel comic world, where every comic thing is happening, because a lot of that because live action plays well overseas and it's not expensive.
And you don't have to understand the language to understand
what's going on. And also at the same time, it reaches back to young people into their childhood, whether there be adults who are like myself, who maybe read the Marvel stuff in the 60s and 70s, or the people now who are maybe into the more manga type comics, but like that kind of comic. And we think of all the fantasy games that are out there today.
Tons of them.
Online, you know, that people are playing and things like that.
And that's kids wanting to immerse themselves in stories, Doug. I don't think that's always a negative. At first I said, oh, it's terrible. The boys, all they want to do is play video games, blah, blah, blah. Well, then I started joining them for some of these games. Now, we limit their time, which you have to do. But if you choose selectively, a lot of these video games are really well-done stories. And a lot of the screenwriters from Hollywood, the people designing this, they're former Hollywood exiles who are now working on this. They're some of the best storytellers out there. So I had all of that in the back of my mind as I wrote this series. Boys love the rapidity of an adventure. They want to go, they want to dig and find and explore and discover. The girls want relationships. They want to understand the deeper feelings of the family and will. So I packed all of that into this series, which is why it took me 7 years. But it's there. I think it's a fun ride.
And it's interesting because you know, you've been on several shows talking about the book, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of what you're trying to get across from a book writing perspective, and also just the idea of going back to the video game thing. Because I was thinking in terms of the age of the people. Do you think in some ways some of our, let's say, millennial plus people may be lost on some of the fantasy? They got rushed so quickly into adulthood that they maybe didn't have the opportunity we might have had as younger people to read those more fantasy kind of books without that being, oh, that's not really for you. You should be reading these Catcher in the Rye or something.
We have a double, I think, problem with our kids today, the world they live in. On the one hand, we push them into adult experiences before their time, before they fully have. We know the brain isn't even completely closed. The lobe isn't formed yet until they're 21. And yet they're rushed into these adult relationships and activities and encounters. And yet, on the other side, we don't allow them to fully explore and use their imaginations. I would argue that the extended older audience for books like this and those video games are the last hold that these people have on their childhood. And the kind of that innocence, that imaginative world, that's how they hold on. And in some ways, it's almost a desperate hold. Part of what I wanted to do with this series is capture kids at a young age, between 5, 6, 7, 8 to 18, to 80. But really to get them, when they're so fertile, when their minds are so fresh and available, and their hearts are so open, to help them go on a fun adventure they can explore with a family.
And before they're jaded.
Before they're well, again, we're willing to take that step of belief when we're that age.
Right.
As we get older, everybody kind of holds it. I wouldn't. Why would the kid do that?
This seems a little...
Oh, come on. There's a relic in the... okay.
Yeah.
But kids will go on that journey with you. And I hope, the way I've written it, that adults will go as well. I mean, you know...
Well, is this the kind of thing, because I know in the back of the book, and I know when you were on the show with Father Mitch, you talked about the idea of this kind of being coming out of your conversations with the kids around the tub and stuff like that.
My own children.
Yeah, that idea is, so clearly this is the kind of book that you see that an adult or a parent could be reading with or to their children.
Absolutely.
Or both reading and then being able to talk about them over dinner or something like that.
No, there's a lot of questions here. There's a lot of historical material I've woven in. Now, you can spend time on it, or you can just say, boy, that was a great ride, let's go to the next chapter. But if you want to talk about these things and explore them further, they're there. In fact, Random House did this beautiful reader's guide that I'm putting up on my website. It's there at RaymondArroyo.com.
So they put that together. I was going to ask you about
they put it together. I didn't.
Yeah, right, okay.
I didn't have to do it. No, but they have a whole team of educators and librarians. They read the book, put these questions, put this whole guide together, and it's fascinating because it helps the kids, gives them clues. A sarcophagus is mentioned here. It looks like this. Here are the 3 options of where it might be. Go online and see if you can find it. It helps them kind of immerse themselves, and they'll get a real visual
And at the same
picture.
time, they're learning, and it's teaching and reinforcing.
They're learning Western history.
Well, it's
Western
interesting too,
civilization.
though, because I know one of the goals of this, again, in a sense, whether it's a C.S. Lewis, maybe in between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, more like a C.S. Lewis style, but not quite as obvious as Lewis, maybe more like the way Tolkien would have the Christian aspects in there, though you have the relic, but the other aspects of it that are in there. Well, sometimes the library people out there today tend to be some of the ones who are the least interested in those kind of moral stories because they don't believe there's any particular concrete morality that can be proffered.
Well, I'll say this. My approach to writing, and the writers I love, whether it's Chesterton, whether it's the great C.S. Lewis, on and on, Roald Dahl, Graham Greene, but I mean, just children's author. Let's stay in the children. E.B. White, Roald Dahl, these great masters of the children's form, they all said, writing for children, writing any story is inherently moral. Because at some point, you are setting up, you're creating a world. In that world is a moral universe that it operates in. My moral universe is a coherent one. It doesn't suddenly turn on you. There's a captain that Will meets in the book that I won't send any spoilers out there. I don't want to ruin the book, but
does he have bulging eyes?
He has bulging eyes, but he's a very pitiful figure, and Will is very drawn to him because he feels sorrow for him. And I spend time in this book unpacking, I think, for kids and for all of us, the nature of good and the nature of evil, and how these aren't always black and white things. It's in the gray where we can get awfully confused. But at the end of the day, there is a coherent moral universe at play, and there are consequences for our actions. And I think a lot of literature that I read to my own children, you come away kind of trying to argue the book away because it doesn't really cohere with life, our lived experience. I wanted a book that, through all its diversity and unexpected twists and turns, felt like life at the end of the day. The relationship with your parents, your grandparents, your great aunt, growing up, apprehending those gifts we're given, which sometimes we're afraid of. Let's face it, the things that we discover we're really good at something, and it scares us a little bit. Because there's a challenge and a burden of embracing that gift, and Will has that difficulty.
Well, so you've got that, and you make that point that you want to have that in a sense, intact family, though it's not a perfect family, which is important. It's important for people to understand. But so somebody says, well, how does that relate to, there's so many kids today coming from broken homes, or they never knew their father, let's say. How can they really relate? Is this really something they can relate to?
There is something in here for everybody. One of Will's friends comes from a broken family. The mother left the father, Simon Blabbingdale, who's Will's best friend, a kid who's kind of shunned. But again, you have, my father came from a broken family. He was always drawn, the stories he was drawn to was like Swiss Family Robinson. It was the things with a family that he could aspire to. Yeah, because it had a whole family there that he could fill in the gaps and realize, okay, my mother is my mother and my father in my home. She's filling both roles. it wasn't something that he said, oh, my family's no good. It helped him make sense of his own family, and he and his mother found a new relationship as a result of those stories. So,
and that gave him a model in a sense of what he wanted for his family.
and when he grew
when
up,
he was going to be a
wanted
dad,
to
this is how it was going to be
and
for him.
my father, family is the most important thing,
Right,
and the bonds of family, and that's his in-laws, his children, his grandchildren, very deeply felt, and I think it all goes back to that experience. He lost his father at 5. His father passed away. But the book, I think, it shows the diversity of family. Families aren't always perfect, but we need elders, mentors. They don't all have to be blood relatives. Will, in fact, is embraced here by a cadre of older characters. Mr. Shen, who's a yardsman, Bartimaeus Johnson, who's his Aunt Lucille's right-hand man at the museum. These are the people who kind of mentor Will along the way when his own father is very upset by Will's newfound gifts, and he doesn't want Will going down this path. So it's that tension, and the father wants to protect his son.
Right.
But the way he does it, like so many
And in
of us,
reading the
isn't always
story, you may
perfect.
have some more sympathy for why the father feels that way. About
Yeah,
that.
as the story unfolds, I think you're going to have real insight into what Dan Wilder's, Will Wilder's father, why he's so protective of his son, and why he's almost so knee-jerk in his repression, and he just doesn't want to see it. He doesn't want to see any of this. We can't do this. We can't go down. Just close the door. Let's turn away and go over here. A lot of people, that's how they deal with life. They avoid. They avoid. And then there are others who kind of rush at it. Will is that character, and so that tension also plays out. There are a lot of character dimensions that, frankly, Doug, I didn't plan. I planned out the plot, I wrote out the background of these characters, but then the collision of that kind of found itself on the page in the telling.
Well, let me ask you, you start off, you've got this wonderful book, like you said, for children and for adults. You start off with a quote from King Lear.
Yes.
If that the heavens do not their visible spirits send quickly down to tame these vile offenses, it will come. Humanity must perforce prey on itself like monsters of the deep. So here you have this book, and you start off with King Lear.
I know. Well, you got to give people a little taste. I don't believe in pushing classics on kids, but I thought that would be the kind of quote that, as you read it later, if you read this book as a child, that's going to go right over your head. As an adult, if you came back to it, it would sink in and you'd go, oh, I see. Because really, this is about, though Will encounters monsters and very dark forces in this book, it really is about our humanity. And that quote talks about, we prey on each other like monsters from the deep. And in the course of this book, in the course of the series, in the course of life, we see people. Look at our political scene. People are preying on each other like monsters. And what does that do to us as a people, as a society, and what does that do internally to us? That's what the book is about, growing and realizing no matter how dark things are, if you believe, and if you can hold on to something lasting, like your family, traditions deeply held.
Your faith.
Your faith, that can carry you through. That's enough. That can take you through even your own mistakes. And what I love about his Aunt Lucille, who's this, I don't want to ruin it, but Aunt Lucille has her own strengths and powers and special abilities. But she tells Will at one point, it's okay. Sometimes our mistakes are the doorways to our future, the doorways to our destiny. And we all make those mistakes. But if we're true to what we're called to, if we're true to what we've been given, you make it out the other side. In fact, it can be better than where you started. And that's what the story is about.
Now, without giving anything away, I mean, Will, and you talked a little bit about it, but has, let's say, some sort of gift, you're not quite sure what it is early on, but you say it showed up at 4 years old. Is that because you believe that's at one point someone become aware they have something that other people don't have, or why 4 was just picked out?
From around that age, 4 or 5, I think, I've always thought children, and I think you agree with me, children have a sense of what they came from. They have a sense of the other world, heaven. They have a sense of the divine. And they see and perceive things around them that we don't. And animals have this same sensitivity at times. And I've seen it in my own life when I'm covering stories of possession, people passing away. you can see the reaction of children and animals. It's very strange.
There's
in
a
some
sensitivity,
ways.
you think?
Sensitivity. I think they. I think
yeah.
they intuit, they see, or they feel something. So at 5 in my book, at 5, Will has began to see these shadows. Now there are people who are sensitives. They see, they can intuit things. There's nothing. This isn't voodoo or something. There are actually people. In fact, Lorraine Warren, who was Ed and Lorraine Warren were the two. She was a sensitive. He was an exorcist. Worked with the church for years and years and years. And they would go into houses and into situations.
She
would go
be like
first. She was the sensitive. She could see and perceive things. Will has a little bit of that in him, and he sees shadows when he's around 5 years old. But when he looks, they're not there. When he turns. As he gets older, these shadows are taking form.
And they kind of move out of the periphery.
Right, and when he turns to them, they're there. And not only there, they're crisp. And when the book starts at 12, these things are actually cohering, and he sees something that no one else can. And what he finds out through his own stumbling, his own selfishness, is that he's part of a much larger story here. And this is it's really the Wilder family saga of what went before and what's to come. And Will is at the central point of that. And so we drop you in the middle of this action. And the reaction has been amazing. From kids, from adults. I think I wanted it first to be a wild, fun ride. That really was my first impetus. If you don't entertain, the rest of it is unimportant.
Right.
But then it really, for me, is about literacy, family, and the history that holds us all together no matter who we are.
And obviously, one of the things you talk about in the beginning of the book, you actually start with based on a historical scene to kind of scene set everything that comes forward. The other thing that struck me in the book, I know with Matt, and I'll reference him because he kind of reads these kinds of books, bigger print. Just even the style for kids. The other thing I noticed is a fair amount of onomatopoeia.
Yeah.
The whole idea of thunk and clunk. And I mean, did you purposely have to clank, think about the fact that it needs to be? Did that just naturally come out?
Well, look, I see it in my head like a scene, and I want the reader to experience it. So, word choice is really important, but I also wanted this to be read aloud. I wanted to create something you could read to yourself, or you could read it aloud, and it would be engaging. And those are suspense devices. When you hear, thunk, 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 and the kids looked up at the ceiling, thunk, thunk, thunk.
Right.
Well, we all go, oh, what's happening on the ceiling?
What's that?
You don't, I mean, even a lousy writer, you go, what's happening on the ceiling? And you want to know. So it's one part device, one part dramatic scene setting, because everybody's sucked into that. And it really, the audiobook, it was great for the audiobook. But I wrote it, and kids like that. Kids like the experience of seeing it and going there. And it paints a whole world for them. What I had to pare back, and my editor, Emily Easton, was so good about, I was so used to writing for adults. I wrote these sort of 3-paragraph scene setting. The light came in, it fell on this, and that was there, and then the vase, and evil. She's like, Raymond, your general audience is going to go to sleep. Kids are going to just throw this thing aside. So I did a lot of cutting, particularly to the scene setting stuff.
You got to cut to the action.
Cut to the action, and you condense it down, and I slide it in between the action.
Okay.
I drop the description in between the action, so you don't write.
So you're into the action while you're getting the description.
That's it. So it taught me a lot about writing for a younger audience and writing for people who don't have a great attention span, which would include me.
Right.
So
there you go. So without getting, are there esoteric meanings in here, like 490 of Rapids Lane? Is 490 a particular number for you?
No.
Is the Bread Box Roundhead anything particular?
Bread Box Roundhead is a cartoon that kids watch on TV, which is an obvious reference to a cartoon series that I personally detest, but that my children watch
for some reason
over and over and over.
Okay.
I think that may be part of the synestry, which I describe in the book, which is this kind of evil cooperative that moves through time. So that's my little. Right. That's my little dig at a certain square animated figure.
Some people might be quite aware with it.
Yes.
What we're talking about.
With a very shrill voice that you talk about exorcism needed. That would be a character.
Well, it's interesting even when you mention it, because you watch kind of the Adult Swim and this whole, watch what started off as nice little cartoons get
Darker.
get darker and darker. And that's also interesting because you were talking about some of the youth books, and one of the ones you mentioned because of the woman you're working with at Random House and
Barbara
stuff like
Marcus.
that, you know, with connection even to the Harry Potter books, which of course there's been some controversy and different people have different opinions of that.
People have problems because of the witchcraft stuff
Right,
in the
exactly. But also it's clear, and it is true, that the stories got darker as they went along.
Yeah, he aged, and they did get darker, and look, she had a big tale to tell. And as a writer, I stand back and I see what she did. It's an amazing thing. And the reach, look, she's got a new book coming out this summer. It's going to be the biggest thing, and it's a play that she just sketched out and somebody else wrote. The attachment for this audience and the yearning for them to grab onto a character. They want a character that they can grow with, and because it sets their inner landscape. When you talk to millennials, they speak referencing the characters from her books. That's what we all want.
Right.
You want that.
The way, in sense, we used to reference literary characters,
Correct.
or even movie lines, like I would tend to do many times. You know,
yeah,
right.
Oh, he's like Sidney Greenstreet
in Maltese Falcon, right? Yeah,
you know, but their reference is Harry Potter.
Right.
So
even their soundtracks come from the video games many times,
exactly
even more than the movies.
That's exactly
that
right.
we have, where we have a great love for movie soundtracks.
It's
I
video
found that
games
it's
for them.
video game soundtracks
and
or
they actually
cartoon
sell them.
soundtracks.
Yeah,
right.
Well, again, I wanted to paint a world that kids could enter into, families could enter into. It does have its shadows in this world,
Right.
but I don't cross the line.
But that's the way the world is on that level. And I think one of the things that Matt mentioned to me that he liked was to make people aware that there is a spiritual battle that is out there.
Right, and that's what the book is about. It's that battle between good and evil, and the biggest battle, though there's pyrotechnics all around, there's lots of things, monsters and things falling, and there are lots that happen in this book. The biggest battle in the story is really inside of Will at every turn. And there's a price if Will leaves the path, if Will gives into his selfishness, his jealousy. Things happen to him. His gift diminishes. And that speaks to all of us. Now, that was something I never intended, Doug. It's something that kind of popped out as I was writing this. So when you get so immersed in that imaginative world, the story does start to tell itself because you're so invested in it. You're so there. And that takes a lot of time, but...
Right, and one of the things that struck me too was the length of this book. This is around 300 pages, 318 pages. Now, when you're writing a book for this age group, is that a little bit bigger book? Is that the typical book? And as far as the chapters, do you have to keep them a certain length
the
in order to
chapters-
keep them moving along for the kids?
Kids don't like long chapters, but you know what? There's a reason that James Patterson is one of the best-selling authors in the world. His chapters are like 2.5 pages because people don't have a big attention span anymore. So they want to ha, but they feel, I've read 4 chapters.
And that's
well, you
the
read
thing.
half a chapter.
And by doing that, they feel like, I'm on my way, I'm getting through it, I can do this.
Right.
Rather than, I've been looking at this book for 2
And
weeks.
I'm still in chapter 2.
And I'm never going to get through it. Why don't I give up?
It gives you a sense of pacing. Now, look, my chapters are not inordinately short, but they do give you a sense of pacing as you go. And I think you have, when you're writing for kids too, when you're writing a thriller like this, you've got to write cliffhangers into almost, there are cliffhangers in the middle of the chapters, and there's usually one at the end of the chapter. And that's the stylistic and kind of puzzle aspect of this, because you have to lay much of that out before you start. Then as you write, things start to shift on you and you got to adapt to it. So it's fun. I mean, it becomes its own adventure. For me, it was an adventure. Certainly the publishing part of it was,
what do you have to do to become a honorary citizen of Perilous Falls?
Oh, you have to do a lot.
Okay.
You have to give up a lot. I think my wife is who is it? It's my wife and my editor.
Emily
I think,
Easton,
Emily.
right.
Well, Emily, she so apprehended this project. This was at another publisher, Doug, and at the last minute, you remember, I bought the rights back because of difficulties with it, and I didn't know what I was going to do with this. My agent had passed away. So we finally took it to Random House. Barbara Marcus, who launched Goosebumps and Babysitter's Club and Harry Potter, she embraced this work. Phoebe Ye, who's the publisher at Crown, which is the imprint at Random House. And Emily and I went on this journey. Emily is my editor, and she so dug into the book, helped me adapt and cut things down. She really taught me how to tighten up my writing for this audience.
Was that different as far as you working with her as an editor than on your previous nonfiction books?
Absolutely.
Was it a different relationship?
Very different, yeah.
Okay.
And it's different for this reason. you're building a whole series. So the moment I turned in book 1, she was cracking the whip on me for book 2. I finished book 2 now.
Right.
We're copy editing book 2. But along with that comes cover design, interior illustrations. Does the map change? What do we want on the flap copy? How big are we going to make this? We got to cut this down. What about book 3? When do you? So it's a constant thing. Their sense of the whole, her ability to kind of grasp the whole picture of the series is what astounded me the most. And she was so, she just helped creatively on so many aspects.
Why
of
was
this.
Perilous Falls founded in 1899? Any reason?
No, just only because the timeline worked out that way. That is when his great-grandfather, Abe, kind of discovered, it was an iron ore town. This is kind of, you get glimmers of this. You won't really get into it till later. But he founded this iron ore town. Then Jacob Wilder was the one that kind of built the building, situated the place, laid it out. We find out in later books why Jacob Wilder, Will's great-grandfather, built this museum in the middle of Perilous Falls, Peniel, and stocked it with all these relics, sacred antiquities. Why? We'll find out.
Okay, and we'll look forward. And let me ask you, for the next book coming out, how often do you, assuming one a year they'll be coming out?
Next March 2017.
So around the same time, we'll look forward to it. Okay, as the adventure continues. Thank you so much, Raymond. Again, wonderful
I'm going to get
work.
you a pith helmet, Doug.
Thank you. Yes, I'm getting pithier in my old age.
There you go.
I'm here with Raymond Arroyo, the one and only author of Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, and I can't promote this enough, especially if you've got kids. It's really important for them to get great reading and great stories. Random House, and a special edition for EWTN people buying through EWTN Religious Catalog. You also get a copy of the show that Raymond did with Father Mitch Pacwa from a month or so ago, and you can get that as well. EWTNRC.com. That's the place to buy it. Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, the one and only Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for joining us right here on Bookmark.